Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Jim Love. I'm the CIO of IT World Canada, ITWC, and I'm your host for today's webinar. And the webinar is called, Is Time Running Out on Your PBX Platform? So if it is, you're in the right place. We got some great content for you today, but before we get started, I have to take care of a few housekeeping items. Those of you who've been to one of the webinars before, this is old hat, but for the new people in there, just to give you a couple things, it'll only take me a second. So we make these as interactive as possible, and that's the big thing that we try to do. So you have a question box in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, and it says Ask a Question. What I'd really like you to do is use that effectively. Ask questions throughout the whole webinar. Make your comments. We're glad to get your comments, and we're glad to get your questions. Now, if we get too many questions, we'll answer them afterwards. So don't worry about that. Be as interactive as you can. We'll also be asking a poll question at a few junctures in the presentation. I think we got one in here today. So make sure your pop-up blocker is turned off. Now, you need that turned off so that this will work. And please participate in the polls. It helps the presenters understand you better. It helps them understand your current situation. And it helps to interact with us so we know we're not alone up here. So we'll make every effort to start and finish on time. So don't worry about that. We'll get you out of here promptly in an hour in there. We've already started on time. We got 50% of the job done. Trust us. Now, what I would like from you, though, is to stick around to get the full benefit of the program. There's a lot of stuff that happens. I've been through this presentation. Obviously, we do the prep for it, and there's a lot of stuff that happens near the end of these things, and it's good. Hang around. And if you do, and wait for a thank you email from us, and that thank you email will also include a download to the presentation. So you don't have to take notes, you don't have to do screenshots or anything like that. We'll send you a copy of the presentation. Relax and enjoy. And as a thank you for attending today and for filling out the evaluation form, and that's important. You have to fill out the evaluation form. I'm going to send you a $10 coffee card, and we'll do that within a month of the program, or the webinar. We send them all at once, so in there. But I'll send you $10. Why? Because you took the time to tell us what you thought, and that's important. And we read all of these things. We use that information to develop better webinars for you. So give us your feedback. We're happy to get it, good, bad, indifferent, whatever in there. That's it. That's the prep. Now onto the program, and this has some personal connotations because I've been around this for a while, and we've actually been in this situation ourselves. But if you're out there and you've had the CS1000, a Northstar, BCM, Mitel, Cisco, Panasonic, NEC, or a ShoreTel telephone system for 5 or more years, the chances are somebody's going to come to you and say, we've already come to you and said, your hardware support's coming to an end. Now, you've got a choice at that point. You can be the guy who tries to scrounge and salvage some points for next time your system breaks down. You can keep a little cubby hole with them in there. Or you could find yourself searching for the parts that are no longer there. Now, just put this another way. The next breakdown could be permanent, and that forces you to scramble to bring your business back online. You don't want to be there. So that's the bad news, and we'll get that out of the way. But the news isn't all bad now, because the people have been doing this. There's a proven migration system and options that allows you to get out of that traditional upgrade cycle. And believe it or not, I think our guests are going to talk about this, save some money as you do that. And more than that, add a range of capabilities that will help you work and outpace your competition. And I've always said to myself, and I say to my staff, change is an opportunity. So we hope we'll talk to you about change, but if you have to upgrade, why not step back a little and take a look at what you really need today and into the future, and take advantage of that need to change to make some really great improvements. That's the heart of this webinar, and as the conversation is going to move rapidly from a needed upgrade to an opportunity to take your company forward, we're going to talk inevitably about digital transformation, and that's it. So I got a great group of people to help with that discussion today. Now, joining me for this conversation are my special guests, Andy Corder. He's the Senior Manager of Sales Engineering at Avaya. My friend and guest, Miles Davis. He's the America's International Mid-Market Cloud Leader with Avaya. Now, these two guys could fill an entire webinar by themselves, but we have, as Steve Jobs always said, that one more thing. And I'm going to welcome Jim Macris. He's the Manager of Network, Voice, and AV Services at the Ottawa Hospital. Now, Jim's doing today in real time what we've been talking about, and he's gracefully agreed to share his personal and corporate experiences with his, not just his upgrade, but how he's looking at these services to contribute to the transformation at the hospital. Now, I have another friend who was actually CIO of the year who was working at transformation in a hospital, and I think Jim will agree on this, is it's not work for the faint of heart. If in working in healthcare, there are all kinds of hurdles, barriers, and challenges, and I hope lots of rewards, but a lot of things that get in the way, and a lot of things that are way more difficult than what we deal with in terms of privacy, security, all of these things in there. So I think I could say it's not for the faint of heart, but I'm also going to say if Jim Macris can do this and make progress, you can too, and you can learn a lot from the experience. So that's my intro to this. Welcome, Andy. Andy, can we hear your voice in there?
Yeah, I'm here, Jim.
Great. And Miles, you there?
Hi, Jim. Thanks for having us.
Great. And Jim Macris, you're there? Because if you're not, I'm talking to no one.
No, I'm here as well. Thank you.
Fabulous. Great. So we're going to get started. Thanks a lot in there, and thank to all of you for tuning up on this. Before we start this, I'm going to bring Andy Corder on and I want to talk a little bit about the PBX customers and why they need to consider the new platform, an open and extendable platform, and I think that's a precursor or prerequisite these days. So when you're planning your transformation from older systems, can you take us through that, Andy?
Yeah, great, Jim. Great question. So, I think you hit it on the head earlier, Jim. It's a time when you start to make a transformation, or you have this kind of old PBXs kind of coming to the forefront, and some of them we can say they're old, but people have still been buying them as early as the last couple of months. But I think really as organizations we need to step back now and look at the new buzzword is digital transformation. So how do we change the way that we do business? And a lot of that's around how do we bring together all of the things in the world, IoT, different devices, and so forth. So the CS1000 we're going to definitely talk about today. That's one compelling event. But as you said, there's multiple other applications out there, or maybe just a need to look at how do I move to a digital world? How do I take my voice platforms and bring them into the digital world? And if we look at digital transformation from the PBX side, as you start to look down this road, there's really two different areas we would look at. How do employees collaborate or communicate together? How do customers collaborate with us better? And, how do other things collaborate with us or with our organizations? So the first one is around employees. So employees today are using multiple devices. So we're really not strapped to the desk. I think there's kind of, the next generation or the new generation that's coming into the workforce, they're much more attuned to using multiple devices, using headsets, whereas kind of the generation that we're exiting from, we're more attuned to having a desktop phone and so forth. So as we do this, the employees are looking for things like a consistent, persistent experience. So no matter what device I open, I should be able to see the last communications that I had, my conversations, whether they be text chat, I get to share documents, everything is stored in one. And I think that's a big thing. We could probably summarize that. That's around simplicity. The other thing that employees are looking for is workflow automation. So how do we automate things that we're either sending to them or when they execute transactions, how do we actually have a workflow execution? And I think more and more today, I find myself speaking more about workflow. So if I was to come into your organization and ask employees, how could we change something that the organization is doing? I'm sure we could fill up a blackboard or a whiteboard quite quickly. The second piece of it is around customers.
Can I just stop you there for a second, Andy? Just back up on that point. This is something we come up with all the time. Is I think people need to realize this is when you're a CIO or you're heading an organization of any sort, employees look at you to see what you've got technologically as part of their job interview for you. These days, people, when you say they're driving change, they're demanding it too. If you want the best and the brightest, you've got to be able to give these facilities to people, or they'll vote with their feet in many cases. Do you find that to be? You hear about that as well?
Oh, absolutely. Employees are looking at what we're using from a technology perspective, but it goes even beyond employees. Look at some of the universities. Students are looking at what type of services do they offer from a collaboration perspective.
Absolutely.
And what we're doing is bringing in, from an Avaya perspective, we've actually set up a sales academy, which is kind of an entry level into our organization. We're bringing in, bright students, if you like, of today's world, and they're starting to drive a lot of the technology that we're adapting. So they're forcing us, even though we have all the technology, they're forcing us much quicker down the digital transformation path ourselves.
Absolutely. And the second thing I always say is that how you treat your employees is how they treat your customers. So those two things go hand in hand. And I've noticed you've got some stuff on customers demanding change as well.
Yeah, no question. Just to finish on the employee, I mean, if we don't give them the right tools, then the ability or productivity goes down because they become, kind of sitting at home, maybe in a home office, not communicating, collaborating, and then we start to lose, we either lose the employee because they want to shift to another company, or, they're not less engaged, so then therefore our productivity goes down. So employees that are more engaged are actually more productive. From a customer perspective, we're seeing a big change where, customers are now demanding change from what our traditional methods were. I mean, in the past, we had call centers they could call in or deal with us for work from a website. Everyone now is looking for more like real-time communications. So I want to buy or engage with you 24/7. I want to engage based on the channel that I have. So I mean, recently I was looking for some property and I pulled up in front of a residence and, my phone said, hey, do you want to see listings within, a mile of where you are? And it popped up and showed me the listing where I was. The only thing it didn't do was hook me up to the agent. So if we start to think about that, this multi-channel interaction, I probably picked up the phone and called a different agent than the one that should have had that property listed. The other big one is around AI or artificial intelligence, things like chatbots. So give me information that I need right away so that I can purchase something for you or consume one of your services. I don't necessarily need to talk. And, as we go down further into this discussion, I think you'll hear from Jim and Miles a little bit more about some other digital transformation capabilities as well.
So great. Yeah.
So at this point, Jim, I'll turn it back to you, and let's see what kind of the audience is thinking on what would drive their transformation.
Yep. So we made the case in here that the CS1000 is going. A number of these other hardware platforms are going. There's the employees demanding change, customers demanding change, and as we face these migrations, we're looking at what we want to do. So we wanted to ask you, when you're upgrading your communications platform, what do you think in there? What are you looking for? And if you just fill in these poll questions, which is great. Are you looking for cost savings, collaboration, workflow improvements, customer experience, consolidation in there? So you can answer any of those. So just be very interested. So jump onto there, and guys, if you take a look, if you just click that surveys tab there, you'll see as people start to answer this, we can see their answers coming in. So don't be shy and tell us what you're thinking. And by the way, thanks for the questions that are coming in. We will get to those. Thanks a lot for those. But jump in and tell us the answer. When you're looking, what's the most important things you're looking for in you upgrade your communications platform? Is it going to be cost savings, greater collaboration, workflow improvements, customer experience in there? The answers are coming in now. Thanks a lot in there. Always, we have a bit of a time delay here, so it always makes me feel like, oh, nobody's going to answer, but you still love me and you're answering. That's great in there. Thanks a lot. Okay, so guys, we can see this coming in. We have enough users in there to actually give something. So a lot of people are looking for cost savings in there. Collaboration and strong workflow improvements, customer experience definitely being in there, and consolidation of I guess hardware and software platforms as well in there. Andy, Miles, is this what you see in as you're looking at this?
Yeah, I think that's this is a typical response of what we would see in the field. So we see cost savings. Obviously, everything we do is about how do we become, how do we save costs, but how do we become much more efficient. It's interesting, though, to see that the workflow improvements is number 2, because they're actually really directly related with each other, right? So workflow enhancements actually lead to major cost savings in a lot of cases.
Yeah, you have to change. You have to change the process, and this whole thing of digital transformation. If you're not making a major change to how you do something, you're not getting major results. There's just no two way around that. People are obviously realizing that. Good one. Good point in there. And I'm just going to go to our guest, Jim. And we'll come back to you on this later. But you led out one of the things you talked to us about was cost savings. I don't want to steal your thunder for later, but certainly people are feeling the same as you. You really do have to deliver those cost savings as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, and there was a few initiatives that we took on when we first implemented our new Aviora system, and I'll give you an example. One was audio conferencing services. We had a hosted solution, so we were able to implement an internal solution right off the bat and save us over $150,000 a year, and it reduced our external calling megalinks because people weren't going out to get to these services, and now they had that all internal calls now stayed inside the hospital using SIP.
Absolutely. And the people who are champions, we see this a lot because we do digital transformation studies a lot. You have to be able to do both. You have to be able to drive costs down and drive that saving into investment in digital transformation. And we still have a strong voting here for consolidation as well. And people are looking at getting to one platform, to getting that simplicity, which I think also adds to cost, having one platform to manage. Andy, do you want to walk us through in your response to that in terms of the one platform approach?
Sure, that would be great. So, so the first thing to understand is when we go out to, customers that have PBXs or older systems, and, we could say legacy, again, I don't like using the word because there's still a lot of business value in those systems today. So, when we start to think about digital transformation, what does it really mean? It really means, enabling new types of innovation and creativity rather than simply enhancing or supporting something that's traditional. So, if you look kind of where we've come from a PBX, they've been around for multiple years, and we'll talk a little more about the CS1000. But, as we move forward, we've not been able to take advantage of layering on new applications fast enough for customers to take advantage of digital transformation. However, some customers, digital transformation may be just something as simple as taking an email into their contact center. And there's many that haven't even reached that. But then on the other end of the scale, it might be something like sending video from a drone to a 911 call taker or something. So we have a variety of different steps. The key point is, how do you get there in steps that, as you just saw the survey, how do I save costs? How do I improve workflow? How do I drive better collaboration? Those are the things that we look for as we drive down this digital transformation. So from an Avaya perspective, we've come through a journey probably in the last 4 or 5 years as we start to transition ourselves from a hardware software company to a software and services company. And part of that is actually evolving the architectures and underlying solutions that we have. So traditionally, if you look at the chart, we look at one platform that provides end-to-end collaboration and communications. And we'll see as we go through this discussion that it's much more than what we thought it was. So on the left-hand side, these are the traditional type services that things like CS1000 and that can bring to you, around rich voice services. So, in CS1000, there's over 800 features. It's multiple vertical. We have military running on it. We have police. We have emergency services and so forth. We have a contact center. In fact, Avaya, we're about 1/3 of the market share globally in contact centers. So we have contact centers that scale from 1 or 2 users up to hundreds of thousands of users. And then we've traditionally played strong in the unified communication space as well. So these are areas that we've started to enhance mobility, the ability to collaborate on whatever device, wherever you are. The right-hand side, though, is where a lot of people don't realize where Avaya has gone. So over the last couple of years, we've started to play in the artificial intelligence space. So what are we doing in artificial intelligence? Some of the examples would be enhancing contact center type services with artificial intelligence, where we can look at not even the traditional analytics of where is a caller, who's a caller, are they a gold caller, a bronze caller, but now we can start to look at what's the age of the caller, what area of the world are they calling from, and we can start to pull in that artificial intelligence information to make smarter routing decisions for an organization. The other area in artificial intelligence that's becoming quite big is around chatbots. So this is the ability for us to carry on conversations with callers, and this may be employees or customers, where we can provide information to that caller and service them. And when we need to, the AI can determine, I can't answer that, and then that's when we would bring in a person. So when we talk about cost savings, better performance, better workflows, these are some of the areas. The other one is around workflow automation. So from an Avaya perspective, we've built applications now that bring workflow automation, and we'll see this on the next chart, where we're moving into a much larger world that's dealing with sensors and a lot of other areas out there. So if we look at the digital workspace, traditionally from an Avaya perspective, we started in the middle around where devices are. We surrounded that then with unified communication and collaboration applications, but now we're expanding into things like sensors. So when you start to look at replacing your PBX, you really start to need to look at what am I doing in collaboration and communications realm, but you also need to look at how am I going to start bringing in other information, other transactions, utilizing the same one platform to start to notify people maybe that there's video that needs to be taken by somebody, or there's an event, something, where's a wheelchair in a hospital. I think Jim will talk a little bit about that later. So we start to bring the intelligence of all of those IoT things into what we would have saw as a traditional PBX. Location-based services, where are you? What kind of services can you consume if I'm driving down the road? Maybe you don't want to send me video. So how do I determine that, and then how do I use those services and adapt to what that user is using? Things like voice assistants, we'll call them virtual assistants. So virtual assistants, things like in a contact center today, we look at many different reports or real-time displays. Future says that I speak to a virtual assistant and ask them how my contact center is doing, and that virtual assistant then tells me how things are working. And I think Jim would appreciate that. From his side, how's my system performing today? And the virtual assistant can give you an update report versus reaching out to one of his staff. And then again, the workflow automation, there's many, many different workflows that we're doing today. Next generation emergency service is a big one that we're working on. And, that starts to bring things like, is my cell phone battery going to die to the call taker? It brings video and so forth. So these are all things that take over from the digital workspace.
And Andy, just to add to that, you could almost put a further circle around these elements and call that artificial intelligence. It's the anticipating what the business, the customer, the employee needs next. So using these tools to now project and anticipate and translate the algorithms of what's gone in the past. And so that's really, these nuts and bolts as you start to work out from what do we have today from a devices perspective, some of the tools that you can layer on to then start to change some of the work styles and automation that you spoke about just earlier.
Yeah, that's great points, Miles. So, just to circle back to, the CS1000 side. So, the CS1000 software, and again, there's many other ones out there, but we'll pick on CS1000 today. That software was actually built back in the late 1970s. So to put that in perspective, a lot of us are running organizations on systems that were actually built before the first desktop IBM PC, which was around 1981. You probably saw my picture. I started back in the industry before there was LANs and WANs, so I kind of come from that world. But I mean, these have serviced us really well. Unfortunately, in the last couple of years, though, they haven't been able to keep pace with the amount of change that you have to have as an organization. So when we talk about one platform, it's all about having one platform that can deliver to you what you need for your business outcomes. So think about it this way. When you start to sit down and ask yourself, what are some of my business challenges that I have? What's my digital transformation strategy? And then start to look at what's the evolution of your PBX. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Jim, and we'll talk to actually Jim from Ottawa Hospital and talk about some of the things they thought about as they made this transformation.
Well, terrific, and thank you, Andy. It's Jim Love here from IT World. I just want to summarize, recap back into what you've talked about, just to say that something that when you're doing this, when you're looking at this, you have to think in a new way. I mean, I've grown up through the systems the same as you have with PBXs and then going to unified communication and thinking that was great. Now having a big world out there for us, and that big world has great possibilities, and in some cases we're limited only by our imaginations, not by the technology today. But it's great to have those great opportunities, but you have to root those in business, and that's where I'm going to bring in Jim Macris. So Jim, thank you for coming in and speaking with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Before we talk about anything technological, I'm so fascinated by what's happening in the healthcare. I don't think people realize the stories that are happening and the work that's out there. Can you talk just a little bit about your transformational experience and a short overview of the Ottawa Hospital?
Well, sure. I'll just give you a quick overview of the Ottawa Hospital first. So we're one of Canada's largest academic hospitals, serving over 1.2 million people in Eastern Ontario. We're multi-campus, so we have 3 campuses with 20 satellite sites, and we have just under 12,000 employees, 1,200 volunteers, and 2,500 physicians, residents, and fellows. We have approximately 118,000 emergency visits, 58,000 admissions, and 1.2 million ambulatory care visits a year, and we also deliver about 6,000 babies. The Ottawa Hospital works closely with the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute, which has over 65 labs, 11 state-of-the-art core research facilities with 562 active clinical trials, which include over 11,000 patients. So we're a fairly large entity in the Ottawa area. We're actually one of the largest employers in Ottawa outside of the city and the federal government.
So yeah, and people don't. I don't think people really realize we all depend on hospitals. We see them, we go to them, but just how big an enterprise this is and how multifaceted it is in there.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And so you're serving a lot of constituents in there. So can you talk a little bit about your digital transformation, what you were thinking about and what you were dreaming about? You come from this is a pretty solid, structured enterprise, and it has to change like anything else. What are some of the things that you've talked about in terms of your change and transformation?
Well, I'll take you a little bit further back, too, because you covered a few points initially. One was the reasoning why we went down this path. So we looked at our CS1Ks. We had multiple systems. So age was one of them. So we had an old system that we had to try to support, and reliability was becoming more and more an issue for us. So we needed something that was very highly available and redundant. So that was one of the reasons why we looked at the Avaya system, because it provided that redundancy and resiliency, geo-redundancy, which we couldn't actually deliver with our current environment. We had 3 CS1Ks, a Mitel SX200, and multiple Northstar systems all across all our campuses. So we were able to actually consolidate those and actually run them over our wide area network, which really has given us the flexibility to build on that resiliency and combined support. So we're not supporting all these different systems and trying to find resources to support them. So it's really made a big difference from that perspective.
Now, this is a 3-tiered architecture in there, and so what were some of your key decision points you were in moving off this? The end of the life cycle was obviously one, and you've talked about open architecture.
Yeah, absolutely. Open architecture was one, something that would future-proof us for the future and allow us to integrate and automate other systems. So we're currently in the process of implementing Epic, and if we had the CS1Ks, there wouldn't be too much more we could do from an integration perspective. But having an open-tiered system would allow us to provide those automations directly into our Epic system. So an example of that, again, is a proactive outreach manager, where we're a patient reminder system, where we're able to notify patients of their appointments and scheduled appointments, and that's brought a huge consolidation, or it's really improved our services while reducing our costs. And because every appointment that's missed costs the hospital money, so we have MRIs and CT scans sitting there idle with employees there because somebody doesn't show up. So having those types of services with a reminder system that allows appointments to be rescheduled by people as well automatically is a huge advantage to the hospital.
So just going through your business case, just recapping this, you had some overall cost savings you were looking at from the platform itself, from just the change in technology, and then you tied those, and those sounded significant to me, then you tied those together with savings you could make by changing workflows, and supporting looking at some of the opportunities for change and in the hospital itself. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we had staff calling patients manually all the time just to make sure that they would come in. We don't do that anymore. We have over 200 clinics that are now automated. So we retrieve all that information from our patient registration system, and those are automatically imported into our proactive outreach manager, which actually does the dialing and confirms the appointment with all our patients. So we do thousands of calls a day just to our patients, where we wouldn't be able to do that previously with just existing staff picking up the phone and calling a patient to see if they were there.
Wow. And of course, redundancy. I mean, use the term resiliency, but you have to be, if the phones go out, I presume it's a major disaster for you.
Actually, we still have a couple of CS1Ks right now that we're just in the process of decommissioning. And just today we had an issue with our T1 trunk. So resiliency is a really big incentive for us. So we're just in the process of, again, switching over to SIP trunking. We're actually, our first migration is happening next week, where we're going to have a geo-redundant system there as well. So we'll be able to, if one SIP trunk is down or one site is down, we'll be able to route that traffic through our other. So providing we're trying to get to the stage where we provide no single point of failure across our environment.
And you're consolidating this into a single platform type of thing. That obviously you had lots of moving parts in the existing one. That's also a part of your savings or your architecture simplification in there. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And look at contact centers. We had multiple contact centers. Now we're able to consolidate those into one and provide a better level of service. We had multiple call pilot servers, which were related to our voicemail. We're now integrated into one Iora messaging platform, which supports over 6,000 users. And now people can actually manage their voicemails through email or through a web browser. So it makes it a lot easier, and it's a lot more productive for the people that use the system.
So some of the core things in there. Let's just branch out into we've talked about the technology and some of the pieces you've done, and obviously the integration with the business. But what other areas do you look forward to if you want to enhance your digital transformation capabilities? What do you obviously the slide says the healthcare is changing. We know that, but how do you think you're going to contribute to that change and help that with the things you're doing technically? Not just even into the single platform, but all of the things that you're doing.
Well, when you look at things like IoT integration, that's one, and AI is the other, right? So you look at healthcare and the proliferation of devices that are now being connected as IoT devices, it's unfounded. We use things like RFID and beacon, tracking locations of devices or patients, vital sign monitors, pump and bedside terminals are just a few examples of the thousands of devices out there for healthcare. So as we move forward, integration between all of our systems, including communications, will allow us to automate workflows when each device reacts to specific triggers. So if you have something that happens, we need that communication vehicle in the background that's going to support that trigger, and we'll be able to notify the appropriate people.
And I think fair to say that this is the foundation for digital transformation in healthcare. It's a hospital is a whole pile of devices that need to talk to each other. I mean, that are happening there. If anybody's been in one, is that fair enough to say? Oh,
absolutely. Like we have hundreds of systems within the hospital. We're now trying to consolidate them under one HIS Epic. So we're actually in a progression there. But if we didn't have what we have today, it would make it very difficult or even impossible to actually do that integration. So now we do have a very aggressive plan to implement Epic. So the intent is to leverage the Avaya system where we can and integrate that into Epic as well.
And once you get that, and I know that Andy talked about artificial intelligence, AI, everybody's a big buzzword, everybody's talking about it, but you're actually looking at ways to make that real based on the building that platform first and being able to use that.
Yeah, well, it's becoming mainstream everywhere, right? So in our personal lives, we have personal assistants at home, and chatbots is another one. Chatbots are another different one in healthcare. So we see the use of that as one of the key areas of consideration that would help patients gain information on such things as appointment and pre-op processes. Chatbots would offer immediate support to patients while reducing the influx of basic inquiries to the hospital. So, but again, we just want to make sure that we always have the option of having a bot pull in a live agent at any time, because a lot of people don't like that and they like to talk to people directly. So we need to incorporate those kind of things. Other areas, things such as scheduling, automated codes, admit-discharge transfers, pre-op, post-op instructions, scheduling, prescriptions, those are all things that we could build in. So being able to provide prescriptions remotely to patients without actually them getting involved is another key one there. So those are all different options that we need to look at when we further start with when we implement our Epic system and how we can integrate all those systems.
Yeah, and it brings it back into the whole things that a hospital loses money on based on a whole pile of little things happening, number of different appointments missed, all those sorts of things. I think it's fascinating to see how we can get on top of some of those things.
Funding is Yeah, funding is decreasing in hospitals. Every year we take budget cuts and everything. So we need to be able to do things better, more efficiently and effectively while still reducing costs, because that's just the way it is these days within the healthcare industry is those funds are no longer available, and you got to utilize those funds appropriately.
I think that's the most amazing thing. I think it's amazing for any CIO or anybody in technology who has to. We all have to face the declining budgets, and but nobody more than healthcare, and yet you're still able to do this. That's phenomenal in there. So the change was necessary. You had to do it. You've got those goals in there. Can we just talk a little bit about your migration path? And for all of the guys who are out there who have to do this and are thinking about doing this, when you looked at the migration path, what are the key elements that you considered as you were moving forward?
Well, the first thing an organization like ours should think about is this isn't just replacing a voice PBX system anymore. Voice is just one of those communication channels that are there out of many channels that you need to consider. With digital transformation, AI, staff and patient experience are all key factors we keep in mind. The way in which we communicate has evolved, and it's now all about the people, process, and things, and collaboration together, right? So things have changed. So when we started down the approach, our migration, we wanted a phased approach, and we wanted a highly available, secure, software-based virtual environment, while we can continue to leverage our Avaya and Nortel experience. So when you look at that environment, it's all virtualized, it's all running on U servers. When we look at our CS1Ks right now, it's all old technology, trying to find a card here and there, trying to get a problem resolved when it's not as easy. So we wanted something that was highly available, and again was in that space of virtualization. Again, we also wanted to keep our current IM present provider. We went through a big implementation of Office 365 with Skype for Business, and we needed to ensure that those systems, again, were compatible with what we were doing with Avaya.
Yeah, it's great to replace something, but you have to make sure that you don't have to replace your other investments as well.
No, absolutely, and that was the key for us because we weren't ready to go down a path of replacing our entire collaboration suite to put in something new. That would be very disruptive to the organization. And then finally, we wanted to take advantage of SIP trunking and reduce our traditional footprint, right? So now we've implemented SIP entirely internally to the hospital, and now we're just in the process of migrating all our external SIP trunks, our traditional megalink trunks to SIP trunking. Like I said, we're actually, our first migration is set for next Monday.
Wow, yeah, and it's one of those things when people's phones don't work. It's like it's not a place you want to be. This is not. You have to do this carefully and well, I think is the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is when the phone system goes down, people are looking for answers right away, right? And when you've got to rely on a tech to come in, whereas right now all it was with our Avaya system, whenever we have an issue, it's you pick up the phone, you hit the red button on the web, and you know what? They're in your system and they're diagnosing. You know it's not really going to be a hardware issue unless you have a virtual failure. You know it's all software based, so it's something that can be resolved fairly quickly.
Yeah, nice. Instead of waiting for parts on an old system in there for sure.
Well, it's funny because today we had, like I said, we had a megalink failure, and I got a text message about 10 minutes ago saying the technician is going to his truck to get a part. Yeah. So
the advantage to software is you can fix it from anywhere. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just want to recap on this. You've got a communication foundation for clinical workflows. That's really what you've created there. It's not just a telephony system, not just a unified voice system, but you've got a foundation for workflows and patient experience. And I know you've talked about that, but I'd just like to circle back to that because I think it's really important, the things that you're doing and planning on doing.
Sure. So when you look at some of our workflow automation, when we started down this, we had some business challenges, and we wanted to improve patient experience and reduce costs. So in the healthcare industry, scheduling and like I said, like completing those procedures is critical to our organization. Like 10 to 30% of appointments are missed, which costs the hospital a lot of money, not just in staff sitting there waiting, but also in the equipment, because again, we get paid based on the procedures and the services that we provide. So if somebody doesn't come in, we don't get paid. So what we did was we undertook a project when we started with our IP telephony migration, and we implemented proactive outreach managers. So we looked at all our clinics and we looked at all the missed appointments. So what we ended up doing over a period of about a year, we've actually moved over 200 clinics over to the proactive outreach manager. So that's really made a huge difference for us because now appointments aren't being missed. If they are, they're very minimal because of an emergency, but it also gives the people the opportunity to reschedule those appointments when they get the reminders. So they have an automatic, they can hit one and it automatically takes them to a booking office where they can reschedule their appointment. So it's really made a huge process improvement for over 200 of our clinics. And again, we're still looking to expand that to all our other clinics. So it's just a moving target that we keep expanding.
Great. Jim, I should ask this when we started up this, but you've been doing network and voice service, I presume, for a while now in there. Did you ever think that you'd have that big an impact on the business?
No, when I first started here, it was more of a telephony environment. Everything was separate: telephones, network, AV services from my component. So now it's one really integrated. There's no difference from a networking person these days from a telephony person. So they're all part of the same team. It's all runs over your IP network. So what one group does really has an impact on all the others as well. So it's kind of nice to see the teams all actually come together as one team.
Yeah, great. Okay, so thanks. That's terrific. And just any advice for anybody who's starting this sort of journey from what you've done?
Well, I think what we did when we started this journey, we actually engaged Avaya, and so we were one of the lucky ones that were able to engage Avaya Direct. So we actually we did the architecture up front. So everything has been architected with one of the advanced architects from Avaya. So we knew the integration. We knew how things were going to work. Everything is mapped out. So it was a process that we went through initially just to make sure that what we were building was going to be sustainable and something that we would be able to grow in the future. So it was a really good exercise to do. So just don't take it upon as just a telephony migration project. This is much bigger than that, and it's going to take a while. It took us over 3 years to migrate over 12,000 endpoint devices, and we're still we're still seeing people, like even with Equinox these days, a lot of people are actually giving up their phone and going to a mobile client, which is really interesting, where people who either have it on their iPhone or they'll have it on their MacBook and they're running their phone client on there. They don't want a phone on their desk. So it's kind of nice. The mobility portion of that is really nice as well.
Great. Fabulous. Miles, I want to bring you back in. I think a great story and an unprompted question. That was totally unscripted with a great mention from Jim there on this one. So there are lots of legacy systems still out there in Canada, and I'm sure that the people who are coming to this are wondering how they can really tie this to digital transformation and do it in a similar fashion to what Jim has done. So how is Avaya getting involved in all of this?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And Jim Macros, thank you too. What a great lead-in live example of what Andy was talking about before, and what I'll cover off a little bit here in the next few minutes. The phased approach that you talked about, Jim, really exemplifies what we're seeing in the market, and you've got this journey that is unique for each different company, yet there are similarities that flow right the way through, similarities and differences that flow right the way through. Of course, many of our listeners may not have the challenge of 12,000 endpoints to migrate. Some may have much shorter time frame than, say, for example, the 3 years that you've been working on this. But in all cases, what we're seeing is this, especially in Canada here, across all size markets, this migration from legacy through to in smaller steps through to future status. Starting with flexibility, as you see here, talking about different processes, simple moves, adds, and changes. Then into modernization phases, so that could be just simply adding step trunking, as Jim's doing as one of his elements, but also introducing mobility, perhaps moving away from sets on a desk in some cases, and certainly making the one-to-many collaboration tools more available. Then you start to scale. So usually what I just mentioned is done sort of in a smaller trial, pilot, take a department, and now you start to scale that out to branches within other departments in head offices. So you start to reach out to work styles at that point, and that's where you get your remote workforce involved and the peaks and valleys of seasonality. And then finally into much more of a hosted business applications model, and that's really, I would say, there's been talk the last 3-4 years, but where it's become mainstream conversation has been in the last 1 to 2 years in terms of what's hosted. Especially from a UC and contact center perspective, I think other elements of IT moved much faster into a hosted model, a hosted environment. We're really going through that phase ourselves as an industry subsector right now. So yeah, and that's the optimization side of it. Any thoughts on that, Jim? I'm sure you speak to plenty of companies, Jim Love, around that migration phase.
Jim Love or Jim Mac?
Jim Love.
Oh, I think the biggest thing that everybody's grappling with, I think, in terms of migration is the amount of possibilities that are out there, and I think that's one of the things that we all grapple with. I mean, and we still have the foundational issues of making sure we provide uninterrupted, resilient service in there. I have the same issues, and that's the same issues I talk to everybody. I think everybody's trying to cope with the amount of possibility and opportunity that's out there and how to fit that together. I think that's why bringing Jim Mackerson was such a great thing, to be able to show this, how this not only works technologically but also works in terms of integrating with the business. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Oh, definitely. And you touched on it there too, which is clarifying a lot of the jargon that's spoken about. I mean, cloud means 10 different things to 10 different people, and that the different deployment options. You can list in a phone book almost. So in addition to the on-premise sort of more traditional models that we still see a lot of, and in certain situations, the redundancy resiliency example that Jim M gave earlier, perfect example of where on-premise still makes good sense. From a cloud perspective, though, or as we're calling them here, in terms of OpEx models, I've really here at Avaya we've split them into 3 main groups, and that's a group defined by where the assets are located, who owns those assets, and who manages them. And so you can see as you work from left to right, there's those that are dipping their toe into an OpEx model where the assets are still on premises. So you could argue for greater redundancy, resiliency in that model. They're still owned by the customer, but still managed by a third party. So all of that expense, cost, complexity is now removed out of the business. A step further is where you're actually outsourcing the ownership as well. So that's more of a financial model. I think that has a much greater impact on assets on books. And then you're moving to an area that we're incredibly active at the moment around, which is where all 3 are run by a third party. Assets hosted by a third party, owned and managed by that third party. So even within that, you can have sub-segments. So dedicated, full, private, everything's lit up with you as the sole customer. That's the equivalent, the analogy I would use to renting your own car, for example. You can go where you want, you can customize how you like. To the shared multi-tenant, more of a taking advantages of economies of scale. That maybe instead of renting a car, you're jumping on public transport. Sure, it's much more cost effective. You could argue in some ways more efficient, certainly to set up. But you're going where everybody else is going. There's less customization in that scenario. And then what we at Avaya are seeing the most of, frankly, is this hybrid model, where we're seeing customers actually take a step back, understand where the OpEx versus CapEx conversation makes most sense to them, which parts of their business, perhaps it's a different conversation, head office, branch, and looking at a hybrid model where they're using the same software code, the same sets, the same devices, the same user experience for their internal constituents as well as their customers, and taking advantage and perhaps also using that hybrid model as part of their migration strategy, growing as they need to, where they need to, and at the pace that they need to. And so that's really that they're sort of how we define cloud, to use a generic term, but OpEx models and more of a subscription model where it makes sense.
So you've offered a variety of options in there and a range of things. I think that's why you'd call it an OpEx model rather than a pure cloud type of thing, right? Exactly.
Yeah. Personally, to me, pure cloud, first thing people think of is the public, fully managed option, and the reality is there's a lot of nuance underneath that can make sense for businesses who are not prepared to hand over all of their data in one fell swoop, all of their communications to a third party. Yeah.
Well, I think the people out there are fairly sophisticated, I think, and if they're having these conversations with anybody, Avaya or anyone in there, you really have to make sure that you're not buying something because it's cloud. You're buying something that fits your needs and is extensible and can grow with you as you go forward. I think that's the basic advice that most CIOs would give their staff if they were sending them out on a search.
Exactly. Yeah, cool. Exactly. Just to finish up with, I know we're short on time now, but to finish up with, just here's some of the ways that Avaya is offering to help our customers, companies that are out there that are currently sitting on legacy PBXs, and some ideas on how we can help with those migration conversations. So first of all, from a sizing and financial perspective, we already talked a little bit about that. One size doesn't fit all, and so we've got different sizing options. The financial incentives that we've put on the table, especially as of the end of sale announcement of the CS1000 on April 9th, we've really taken the gloves off when it comes to those programs now, and it's really something that we've seen as bringing a sense of urgency. I think there's definitely a win-win moment in time here for all of us, especially those that are on legacy Avaya platforms. And so I do encourage everybody on the call to reach out to a current partner or to Avaya. There's a website set up for the CS1K migration platform. If you just Google CS1000 Loyalty Together, it's called. That will bring up the details around those programs. But also, we recognize that that's really just the tip of the iceberg. What's real? What in terms of real concerns for somebody looking at a migration, you need to make sure that you're not leaving anybody behind. So a lot of the work that we've done in that migration has been making sure that certain features are porting over, that those rip and replace fears are addressed. And it's not that. It's very much a case of bringing what's worked for you in the past across with you to the future, and building on those, that some of these features and functions that I've listed out here. Same applies to, some of the hardware, especially from a set perspective, making sure that, heritage sets are lit up on some of the new platforms, recognizing those that have invested in via software over time, and making sure that, we move quickly to provide, as pain-free and seamless a migration as possible to those that are beginning the journey, shall we say. So ultimately, any good business case needs to start with the end goal in mind. What is it that your company is looking to do? And that answer will vary depending, again, on size, industry, what you're looking to do strategically from your company's business plan to help you differentiate yourselves from the competition. So all of these options really designed to our customers, as I said before, migrate what they need, where they need, and as I said, at the pace they need, just as importantly as the first two.
Okay. Miles, thank you. We got a number of questions out there. I don't know how we could get to them all, but we will. I promise we will follow up with the questions. I think I can make this promise for you and Andy, is we'll follow up with the questions. If we haven't answered them in the course of the webinar, we will make sure that answers get out to people in there. If that's fair, I'm making that promise for you, Miles and Andy. Is that okay?
You bet, absolutely.
Okay, great. So just a couple of things. People asked about the stats, and we're going to make the slides available for you. And do we have the source of the stats on those slides, or can we tell people where those stats come from?
Yeah, the source is on the slides, Jim. If we'll just validate, but the source should be right on the slides.
Fabulous. So when you get them, you'll be able to get those, and you'll be able to see where those came from. Follow up more about the studies if you want. Now, somebody mentioned mass notification. It was Tracy. I'll just use first names out there. Mass notifications. I guess is that an interesting part of this? I haven't heard the term, so I'm not sure if I've got it right.
Yeah, there's no question, Jim. It's Andy. So mass notifications is one actually that is actually pretty prolific, and it's prolific across multiple industries. And I think this is one of the parts where Miles spoke about having hybrid cloud and that. So there's different ways to do it. You can build the application in the open environment for mass notifications that you own as kind of, let's call it a CPE environment, or we can actually consume those services in a cloud base. So we offer both of those. We have a platform as a service where you would actually light this up and you pay per use. That could overlay independently of your environment, and then it can do mass notifications out with SMS or voice. And the key thing is when you do multiple mass notifications, you do need to do multi-channel because a lot of people are looking at SMS. Or we can actually build that in your own environment. And then, of course, the trigger for that is things like Jim spoke about, which would be, automating codes. We've all been to a hospital and heard code red or code blue or code pink. Automating those workflows so that they will actually automatically bring the right people to the table without you really doing anything except for having a trigger. That might be a sensor. It might be somebody going on a web page and triggering something. So absolutely, that's a great question, and absolutely a big piece of digital transformation.
Great. And I guess one of the questions came up, what happens if connections fail and all that sort of thing? Are you up internally? What happens? How do you deal with those sorts of issues? Either Miles or Andy, how do you maybe Jim Macris has an idea as well, but how do you deal with the fact that we're so network dependent? I guess you're dependent on any phone system, but what do you do when you're cloud based and all that?
So I think.
Okay.
Sorry,
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
From our perspective, is we got a fully redundant network between all our campuses, so all our phones register to different session managers across, so they each have a 3 registration. So if any of those systems fail, like if our campus at the General and the phone system goes down there, the phones automatically re-register to a different campus through our wide area network, which again provides the services, so they just go out. So having an internet failure, everything will work internally. Everything continues to work internally. Now, if you have your SIP providers that are down, which why we're building a geo-redundant SIP provider, so if one of our services fails, the phones will just go out the different SIP services. So we're trying to build that full redundancy into our system. So from a on-premise solution.
How did I know you'd know the answer, Jim? Anyway, we're 1 minute to the end. Sorry, Andy, do you want to say something?
One other thing, right? So keep in mind that with redundancy and resiliency, actually, when you start to do hybrid cloud or cloud, it does bring some more flexibility. Obviously, we got to look at the enterprise, but it also brings flexibility in the cloud of providing higher resiliency and redundancy as well, because now you have the cloud environment is built across multiple virtual data centers and so forth in the cloud side, so you can kind of complement your existing CP in a hybrid world, or we can start to look at what do you do in redundancy failures when you have, when you're having failures potentially in the cloud with things like RAS, network connectivity, and so forth.
Great. Well, we have to wrap up, guys. We promised to get people out of here at 2, and it's 2 o'clock in there, so I want to just wrap up and just say a couple of things I took away from this in there, and is we've tried to give you a full picture of what's happening out there. But when you think about the replacement, simple hardware replacement or upgrade that is there, that is on us all if you have that hardware, I guess the message is think bigger. Think bigger than voice. Think integration, and think of this as an architecture. And I'm so impressed with the maturity of cloud architectures, be they in any section, but in voice. Think about the ways you can meet your current architectural needs and your future or your target needs. It's still the same story in there. I'm going to thank Andy and Miles for coming in on this and giving us their perspective. And special thanks to Jim Macris for coming in and being so calm while all your world is going on around you out there and sharing your wisdom with us today. A special thanks to Avaya, and I will say that the sponsors who put these come in here, we asked them not to make it a commercial, but to give you some great content, and I hope we've done that today. And they sponsor these things. Without that, we couldn't bring you this type of content, bring you these types of issues. There are existing questions in there, and because you were just great with your questions, we promise we will get back to you and there. I'm going to leave it with Miles and Andy just for a quick 30-second wrap-up on that, and then we'll say goodbye to everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Just echo your thanks to everybody for joining today, and especially to Jim Macris for joining us amid the firefighting that has come with the day. In terms of some of the questions, what we will do is respond back to the individual askers of those questions. We'll make sure everybody gets the feedback there. And again, really enjoyed working with you again, Jim Love, and appreciate IT World Canada hosting us today for this session.
So thanks to you for coming out, everybody out there in the audience. Without you, obviously, it wouldn't be much of a show, but we produce these things for you. So please, good, bad, indifferent, whatever, send us your comments, fill in your forms at the end of this, and tell us how we did. Tell us how we can be better, and that's it. So every good conversation feels like you want it to go on, but you got to get back to work, and so do we. So goodbye from IT World Canada and from Avaya and from Jim Macris at the Ottawa Hospital, and we'll talk to you next time.